Have you ever woken up and felt like the world around you was falling apart, only to have people tell you, just be resilient? To be honest, I used to find that phrase incredibly irritating. For a long time, we've been boxed into these dry, academic definitions that treat resilience like a steel shield designed to make us immune to adversity. But when I stripped away that theoretical armor to look at the raw, gritty reality of life, I realized a completely different truth. Resilience isn't something that protects you from breaking. Instead, it's the toolbox found beneath the rubble that helps you repair and rebuild your life after the fracture has already happened. We often mistake resilient people for being iron-faced, individuals who don't feel pain when life hits them hard. But in reality, the most resilient people I've ever met still tremble, still hurt, and sometimes even shatter when a crisis hits. The only difference is that they don't let that pain define who they are or swallow their future. Think about the difference between a rigid glass cup and a heavy-duty spring. If you drop the glass, it shatters because it refuses to yield. But the spring absorbs the impact, compresses, and uses that very pressure to bounce back. True strength isn't about how long you can tough it out. It's about how much you're willing to bend to adapt. In a world of constant flux, stubbornly trying to remain unmoved is often a silent form of regression. Don't try to be an invincible statue only to end up broken. Allow yourself to be flexible. Because at the end of the day, the pinnacle of survival isn't being immortal to pain. It's the ability to navigate your own transformation right from the ashes of failure. But here's where things get tricky. In our effort to be flexible, there's an invisible trap most of us fall into. We accidentally turn ourselves into people who are just over-enduring. We mistake the act of gritting our teeth in silence, absorbing exhaustion without a word, for a sign of strength. The truth is, the line between a truly resilient person and someone who is just self-sabotaging through endurance is much thinner than you think. If you can't distinguish between genuine recovery strength and toxic endurance, you'll soon find yourself looking sturdy on the surface while actually rotting from the inside out. To understand why we often feel stuck, we need to perform a bit of psychological surgery. In the modern dictionary of success, we tend to conflate three entirely different concepts: grit, resilience, and hardiness. Think of it this way. Grit is like an internal combustion engine. It's the sustained power that keeps you chasing a long-term goal for years, regardless of boredom or fatigue. It's a story about moving forward. Resilience, on the other hand, acts as the lubricant in that system. It isn't the engine itself. It's the ability to bounce back when your machine hits a massive boulder and nearly shatters. But what about hardiness? This is where it gets dangerous. Hardiness is more about pure endurance, the ability to swallow your tears and absorb pressure without showing a single crack. The most fatal mistake we make is trying to use hardiness as a substitute for resilience. You can use hardiness to stand your ground during a storm, but it's resilience that actually helps you survive and bloom afterward. If you only know how to endure, you're like a rod of tempered steel. Sturdy, yes, but once the pressure exceeds your limit, you snap into pieces with no way to recover. And we have to be careful with toxic positivity. Forcing yourself to smile and say everything is fine when your soul is actually fractured is an act of self-sabotage. You're robbing yourself of the right to grieve. That isn't resilience. It's denial. To truly recover, you have to go through the pain, not around it. I've noticed that in the age of social media, We're facing a form of micro burnout. Every time you scroll through your phone and subconsciously compare your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, you're taking another lash at your own self-esteem. Our resilience is being eroded by these emotional whips every single day, leaving our brain on red alert, draining our recovery energy before we even realize we're exhausted. So, the question isn't how much you can take, but rather, are you self-aware enough to recognize when you're toughing it out the wrong way? We spend our lives building high walls, convinced that vulnerability is a fatal flaw. But there is a profound paradox. Vulnerability isn't a weakness. It is the very birthplace of courage. If you don't allow yourself to open up and feel the weight of the pain, you'll never create the internal space necessary to hold the recovery. Look closely at the mechanics of a resilient mind. It isn't built with cold concrete, but anchored by 4 deeply human pillars. First is courage, the decision to keep walking even when your knees are shaking. Then comes connection. When you dare to strip away the mask of perfection and own your scars, you create a powerful tether to the world. This connection is the backup generator that kicks in when your internal battery hits zero. Alongside these are empathy and self-compassion. Think about how often we treat ourselves with a harshness we would never show to a stranger. Resilience isn't about self-punishment. It's the ability to sit down, embrace your own flaws, and gently help yourself back up. Resilience in the 21st century has evolved. It's no longer just the capacity to absorb pressure. It's the bravery to disconnect and defend your boundaries against a tidal wave of toxic information. We cannot recover if we keep letting the outside world dictate our own heartbeats. So, where do we begin the reconstruction? Sometimes the solution doesn't lie in doing more, but in doing things differently. For those of us who are introverted, strength doesn't come from mimicking loud aggression. It comes from tactical stillness. It's about establishing clear boundaries and allowing yourself a 10-minute walk without your phone after a heated meeting, rather than forcing an instant reaction to every pressure. In a world of fragmented attention, grounding techniques act as psychological first aid. It's as simple as focusing on the steam rising from your coffee or the feeling of your feet on the floor when a deadline feels like it's crushing you. Just a few minutes of intentional disconnection directly restores the brain's ability to regulate emotion. This isn't an escape. It is a vital recharge. The power of cognitive reappraisal is seen in how we handle the small shipwrecks of our week. Imagine you've spent months on a project, only for it to be canceled in a 5-minute email. A hard person might burn out in anger. But a resilient person is like a chef who accidentally burns the main course and decides right then and there to turn the remaining ingredients into a signature side dish. They focus on the core tools they still have to create something new. However, resilience is a double-edged sword. Never let your ability to bounce back become an excuse to stay in a room that is constantly catching fire. Mental strength was not designed for us to endure toxic managers or one-sided friendships forever. A wise person knows how to adapt to survive a storm, but they also have the bravery to recognize when it's time to leave the shore entirely. The pinnacle of personal resilience isn't about enduring until you are a hollow shell. It's about knowing when to bend and when to firmly walk away. We don't live to become monuments to suffering. We live to pick up the pieces of a bad day, a bad year, or a bad breakup, and build a version of ourselves that is deeper and more authentic because of the cracks we've mended.